Hi, welcome to my channel. For today's video, I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite books that fall under the friends to lovers trope. So I have talked about this trope a lot before on this channel. I always say how it's my favorite trope. I constantly bring it up, I feel like, and I've never done a video of my favorite friends to lovers books. So I'm going to be going through a few today. A lot of these books I have mentioned before. I've talked about them. They're also some really popular books. So I did just want to say that I do hate kind of being like repetitive with book recommendations, but I'm going to mention them anyway because they are some of my favorites. So this is kind of just me sharing my favorite books that are friends to lovers. I do kind of categorize friends to lovers like under different subcategories. Like I feel like there's like best friends to lovers and then like strangers to friends to lovers, and then there's also like childhood best friends to lovers. So I feel like there's kind of like different subcategories and kind of subtropes within all of these. So yeah, so I kind of categorize them differently, but for these books that I'm going to mention today, there's kind of like a mix of different types of subcategories of friends to lovers. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. So yeah, let's just get into all of the books. So the first book I'm going to bring up is part of a series, and I have brought it up before. I've talked about this series before. Obviously I like don't shut up about it, but the book is Addicted to You by Kristen Becker Ritchie. This is the first in the Addicted and Calloway Sister series. If you've watched any of my videos, I feel like I literally just talk about this series all the time, but the series does follow different couples and each of them kind of has like their own tropes, but these two are childhood best friends, and it also has fake dating because the two of them do have addictions. The main character Lily has a sex addiction and then Lo is an alcoholic, and so they fake date to hide that from their family. And yeah, that's the main premise of this book, and you kind of see like a lot of like the ugly side of their addictions and kind of seeing how it affects them and eventually like kind of pulls them to their rock bottom, and you see kind of how they enable each other but eventually learn to like lift each other up and help each other. So I really love this story overall. Obviously it's a whole series, and you kind of have to read them in order, and they all like follow each other. Like it's not really a standalone. This one kind of ends in a way where you kind of would want to pick up the next one, I feel like, just because it kind of is a very like incomplete book on its own. You'd like kind of need to read the whole series to get the full story, but this is one of my absolute favorite love stories ever. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. I know I like talk about it all the time, but I feel like I just had to bring it up because obviously these two are best friends and they're one of my favorite book couples ever. The next book is one that I've definitely talked about before, and it's an author that I've mentioned before, but it's People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Again, these two are best friends. They meet in college and they go on vacations together every year, so you get to see them like through the years and see kind of how their friendship develops into more. And I just really loved this book a lot. I thought it was so cute. It's a rom-com. It's like pretty lighthearted for the most part, but I just really loved their friendship. It was just a really cute book. It's one that I read last year and it's still just one of my favorite books. I just love it so much. This one's my favorite also by Emily Henry. So yeah, again, I know I've talked about this book before, but I just had to mention it again. The next book is again one that I've talked about before. I've actually done a book review video on this one like way back, I think in September or October maybe. I don't know. I read this one kind of a while ago. I think it was in October, but it's The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This book follows two best friends. They meet in high school and now I think they're like in their late 20s, and so it follows Bree and Nathan, and Nathan is a professional football player and Bree is a dance teacher and she owns a dance studio. And so basically they have both been in love with each other since the moment that they met, but the other one like doesn't know it. It's actually really frustrating in this book how much they like don't want to admit that they like each other because they're scared of what the other person's gonna say. But I thought this book was adorable. I really enjoyed it. This one has like no spice in it at all. It kind of feels like a YA book in a way. I mean, I think a young teenager could read it, but yeah, it's also just a really like sweet and wholesome book, and I just really love it. I thought the friendship was really cute and I liked the story overall. I haven't really read anything else by Sarah Adams, but I enjoyed this book enough that I want to read the rest of her books. The next book is another one of my absolute all-time favorite rom-coms, and I'm pretty sure I've talked about it before, at least briefly, but it's Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. So this book was, I think, like the first best friends to lovers rom-com I ever read, and I was just obsessed with it. I loved it so much. I thought it was so cute. I was like smiling the entire time while I was reading this one. This one is my favorite book by Christina Lauren. I've just really loved pretty much all the books I've read by them. I think they're all really cute, but this one was just my all-time favorite. I love it so much. It's one of the cutest books I've ever read. And in this book, the two main characters, Josh and Hazel, they met when they were in college, and now again it's a few years later and they are like in their late 20s now. I feel like a lot of these stories have similar stories storylines to them, similar things happening. But anyway, they've like reconnected now in their late 20s, and they reconnect because she's friends with his sister. And then I think he recently broke up with his girlfriend. So the two of them are both single, and they both start setting each other up on dates, and they go on like these double dates together, and the dates just like all go really badly, and eventually they start to realize that they've been setting each other up like to date other people when they should just be dating each other. And so yeah, this one was really cute. I really loved it. I really loved both of these main characters. Hazel was just a really like fun character to read, and I just loved the way that she was and how she wasn't really like afraid to be herself. And I love the way that Josh was, because he was so sweet and he like really loved her for the way that she was, and it was just really cute to read that. So I really loved this book. It's literally like one of the cutest books I've ever read. So the next book is From Look Up With Love by Mariana Zapata. This one is enemies to friends to lovers, and the two of them are figure skaters. The two main characters are Jasmine and Ivan, and so when their new season starts up, Ivan needs a skating partner, and Jasmine hasn't competed like in a few years, so she ends up agreeing to skate with him. And yeah, they start training together, and through that they kind of start to get closer to each other. They kind of didn't like each other at first, but then eventually they kind of start to form this friendship, and it's just really cute. I really loved this book a lot. I loved like the progression of their relationship because it just seemed really like natural and it just made sense. So I just really enjoyed this book. It is a slow burn, like really slow, but it was also a really amazing book. It's definitely my favorite by her. So the next book is Colty, which is also by Mariana Zapata. I read this book in November, and I did do a book review video for this one. That was so long ago, I don't even know what I said, but I really loved this book a lot. I thought it was also really cute. I didn't really expect to enjoy it as much as I did, and yeah, it was just a really good book to me. This one's probably my second favorite by Mariana Zapata. Most of her books do follow kind of like the friends to lovers trope, and they're also like really slow burns, and I just really like the way they're written, like the way she writes her relationships in her books. So yeah, so these two kind of start off as enemies. They don't really get along at first, they kind of clash a lot, and then eventually they start to form a friendship because they do have to work together. This one follows a professional soccer player and her coach, so it is a bit of an age gap. I think it's like 12 or 13 years between them, and he's like the assistant coach, and he's also a very famous soccer player, so he comes in for this job, and she was really obsessed with him when she was younger, and so now he's the assistant coach on her team. They kind of start to get to know each other, they kind of form this friendship, and then eventually they start to fall for each other. I did really enjoy this book. I like how it was written. I feel like with the way it's described, it might seem like there's this like weird dynamic, like a power dynamic, you know, because he is her coach and he is older than her. But I feel like this book didn't really make that an issue. It did come up that he was older, but it wasn't like a huge deal or anything. And same thing with him being her coach, like it kind of briefly came up, but no one made it into like a huge issue. So I did really like that, because I feel like when you hear about this book and what it's about, you would assume that that might be like an issue, but I'm glad that it wasn't, and I feel like it made the book enjoyable just knowing that that wasn't like a problem for them. But this one, again, it's just one of those books where I really loved the progression of the relationship. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. So this book is part of a duology. It follows It Happened One Summer, but in this book the two main characters are really good friends. They met in the previous book, and so at this point they already like kind of know each other. They exchange numbers, they've kind of been texting back and forth, and they've just like formed this friendship over the last few months. And so the main character Hannah goes back to the town where Fox, the other main character, lives, and she's there for work, and she ends up staying in his apartment since they are good friends. And the two of them kind of have feelings for each other, but she also liked this other guy before, so he assumes that she still likes him, which she kind of does, but over time she starts to realize her feelings for her friend instead, especially as she's living with him there in his apartment. But yeah, this book was really cute. I really loved it a lot. I loved kind of the whole like overall story of it. They were both kind of standing in the way of themselves, of like having what they wanted in life, and so I just really liked the way that they both kind of like overcame that together and eventually fell for each other, and it was just a really cute book. I enjoyed this one a lot. The next book is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. So this book follows Josh and Kristen, and their best friends are getting married, so they're both in the wedding. She's the maid of honor and he's the best man. So that's kind of how they connect with each other. That's not how they initially meet, but they do kind of like have that mutual connection, and so they kind of start to form this friendship. Josh likes Kristen, but she's kind of trying to keep her distance from him. The main reason being that he really wants like a big family, and she's about to have like a medical procedure where she's not going to be able to have children. So definitely check trigger warnings for this one, because it does kind of deal with like more serious topics. This one isn't super lighthearted either. Obviously, like it looks like a cute little rom-com. I thought it was, and then I was crying while I read it, but it is a really good book. I really love this one a lot. I know like I've seen people kind of have some mixed opinions on it because of things that happen in it, but I personally really enjoyed it. I thought it was really cute. It's definitely one of my favorites. This one is again one where the main like love interest is really sweet. I really loved him a lot, and I also really liked the main character too. She was like a fun character to read also. There is a little bit of the whole like not like other girls thing going on in this book at one point, but I feel like in the second half like they kind of drop that and it's like fine, but at first I was kind of like iffy about it. But overall this one was a really cute book and I really enjoyed it. The next book is Hot House Flower, which is also by Krista and Becca Ritchie, and this one is part of the Addicted and Calloway Sisters series. So in this book, the two main characters, there is a bit of an age gap. She is 18 and he's 25, and they start off as friends, and so I feel like that's where I wasn't completely bothered by the age gap, because before I read this book I didn't know how I felt about that because she is so young, and they did meet when she was underage still. So I don't know, I was kind of like iffy before I got to this book. Like I didn't know how I'd feel about it, but I was still planning to read it because I really loved this series at that point. And this one ended up becoming my favorite of this series after I read it. I don't know if it's still my favorite, but at the time it definitely was, and I just ended up loving this book a lot more than I expected. But yeah, so I feel like a big part of why I like got past the whole age gap thing is because they genuinely started off as friends and then eventually it kind of evolved into more, especially because the two of them have kind of gone through a lot, and they're both kind of very similar. They're kind of very selfless people, I feel like, and they kind of both needed someone and they kind of were there for each other. So I just really loved that about this story. So yeah, this one is definitely one of my favorites. Like I said, it was my favorite in the series at the time when I read it. I really was not expecting that, and then this is the book that made me like really fall in love with the series. So yeah, this one is a little bit different from like Addicted to You because they have a friendship for like a short time before they eventually fall for each other, whereas Addicted to You, they are childhood friends. But this one is still a really good book and I really enjoyed it a lot. The next book is Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. This one I've also talked about before. I've talked about all of these books before, so I feel like I don't need to keep saying that. But in this book, it takes place in a small town. The main character is Bree, and she moves to this small town to kind of get away from her life. A lot of really traumatic things have happened to her recently. So she moves away to this town and she meets Archer, and he's kind of like the outcast in this town. No one really talks to him, and he kind of like stays away from the town for the most part. So she meets him and she's kind of like interested in him, and she kind of like starts to get to know him, and she goes to like befriend him because no one else really speaks to him. And yeah, she finds out a lot of things about him. They both have really traumatic pasts. This one definitely check trigger warnings for it, but they slowly start to get to know each other and they just become really good friends before eventually falling for each other. And this one was just really sweet. I really loved this story. A lot of it is kind of their relationship developing, I feel like, and them kind of like moving on and healing from their past a little bit, or at least trying to, and then eventually things kind of happen, but not until like kind of towards the end of the book. But yeah, but overall I thought this book was amazing. I cried a lot while reading it, but it was a really good book and definitely a really sweet friends to lovers story. The next book is Say You Swear by Megan Brandy, which I have been talking about a lot recently because it's literally one of my all-time favorite books now. I'm just obsessed with it. It's such a good story. But in this book, I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to give anything away, but I have also done a review video for it. But obviously it is friends to lovers. The relationship in the story does start off kind of slow, but it's just such a sweet relationship. Like I loved what happened and everything and how it developed, and I loved like the love interest and just the way that he was so sweet. I've talked about it so many times. He's literally my all-time favorite book boyfriend now. I just love him so much. But yeah, again, I feel like I can't say too much about it. I will say it is a sports romance and the main characters are in college, but there's like so much to this story, so like I feel like those things shouldn't really define what this story is because there's literally so much to it, but that is like a part of it. It's kind of a sports romance, but I feel like that was such a small part of the story because there's just so much more that happens in it. Yeah, there's a lot that goes on in this book, like a lot. It's a really heartbreaking book too. Definitely check trigger warnings for this one also, but it's an amazing book and I just really love it, and I loved the story. I loved the friends to lovers aspect of it. So yeah, I feel like I've been talking about this book a lot lately, but that's just because it's really amazing and I just love it so much. So those were all the friends to lovers books that I wanted to talk about. Those are kind of just my favorites that I've read over the last couple years. I've definitely read more. I have other ones that I can talk about later on, but yeah, those are kind of just the ones I wanted to talk about today. But that's it for this video. Definitely let me know any of your thoughts on these books, or let me know if you have any friends to lovers recommendations. But yeah, if you liked this and you're new to my channel, I would love it if you'd stick around and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.